All right, thank you for joining us today. My name is Solomon Oluwabiye. This is Viewpoint Ministries podcast. Usually, we have a whole hour long, and if you miss that, I will encourage you to go to our YouTube platform and listen to that, watch it, and share with others because I know for sure you will be blessed. There, we talk about worshiping as a living sacrifice. So, whatever your view of worship is all about, I hope you get it correct. But in any case, don't worry. Just go over to our YouTube platform and then listen to it. It will take you about 1 hour. I promise you, you will enjoy it because it's going to give you some great ideas, some revelation, if you will, into what it means when you hear worshiping as a living sacrifice. It is not what you think. It is not about singing in church on Sunday. It is not about that solo singing you do in your kitchen or in your bathroom. Okay. But go listen to that. All right. So now let's go to the business on this side. And this side, we're going to be looking at the role of obedience and surrender in true worship. The role of obedience and surrender in true worship. Sometimes some people go into the mode of worship. Now I'm talking about singing or praising, right? With certain mindset. And some goes and it end up to be some spontaneous kind of worship. And I'm not talking about in a coordinated environment now, because if you're in a coordinated environment, that's a little bit different. You should follow rules, you should follow order. Our God is a God of order. Okay. But when you're by yourself, there are certain spontaneous songs that will come as a means of worship. Now, but we'll learn though from our a whole hour program that we just ended that it is not just about singing and praising praises that we derive worship from. Well, here we're going to be looking at the role of obedience. What does obedience has to do? What does surrenderedness has to do in true worship? Well, helping us with this is none other than Minister Grace Isaac. Thank you so much for being with us today on this podcast platform.
Thank you for having me again.
Very good. I hope that those who will be listening to you on this part, they will understand that we've gone through an hour of a program, and you may end up to say certain things that they might need to go listen to the whole full scope on the other side. But for their benefit, we have just finished worshiping as a living sacrifice, and now we're talking about the role of obedience and surrenderedness. What does that has to do? How does this affect one's worship? How does obedience? I can just, in my room, I can just start to sing. I can sing any song, right? I can worship God anyhow. I can choose to roll on the floor. I can choose to be jumping jazz, and I can be doing whatever, doing right. But there is a place where the Spirit of God can actually direct me, can guide me as to what to do. So it's not just every time people lay down to pray or people are rolling on the floor and they are singing or worshiping God that somebody else should copy, quote and unquote, copycat. Where is this obedience is placed and where is this surrenderness placed? Over to you.
Thank you, sir. You said that it's not in laying down and probably singing how somebody's singing. In the past, the earlier segment we had, we were talking about worshiping as a living sacrifice, and we did mention that worshiping as a living sacrifice doesn't technically mean the songs you sing. It means like you as a person, as an individual, living, breathing, eating, drinking water, whatever it is. You have come to a place of total surrender and knowing that I am not here to live. My life is not for me. I am living and worshiping to the audience of one, and that is God. So when you now bring it to this one, the place of obedience, total surrender in worship. John 14:15 says, "If you love me, keep my commandment." I read it two more times. If you love me, keep my commandment. Again, if you love me, keep my commandment. What is that telling us? That is telling us that the role or your role, the role of obedience and surrendering is important for you before you can truly worship God. And now this is me breaking the question down. If you love me, keep my commandment. Meaning, if you love me and you keep my commandment, you become an acceptable sacrifice that can truly worship. Because what is worship without obedience? What is your worship without surrendering? What is your worship when you don't keep his commandment? Because if you don't keep his commandment, then you don't love him. So it's telling you that the proof, at least, sometimes among couples, the husband will say, "Oh, this is how I receive love." The wife will say, when you, for example, help in the kitchen, that is how I feel loved. That is how I receive love. If we switch it over, God is telling us here that the way I receive love is when you keep when I say something and you listen and you keep my commandment. That is how I receive love. So everybody has their way of receiving love, including God. But it's telling us that the only way I receive love, I only have one way. For human, our ways change. Today, I can receive love. I can say, "Oh, when you give me gifts, that's how I receive love, through giving of gifts." And tomorrow, I tell you that it is when you spend quality time with me that I know that I feel loved. But God is telling you that I only have one way of receiving love, and that way is when you keep my commandment. So, what role do you now think that plays in true worship? Or do you now think you can separate keeping his commandment, obedience, loving him from true worship? So technically he's saying that if you do not keep my commandment, or maybe let me use the first one, if you don't love me, you cannot truly worship me. Because when you love him, remember, you will keep his commandment. But when you don't keep his commandment, it will show that you don't love him. So if you now want to become a true worshiper, love God. Because when you love God, you will keep his commandments. And once you are keeping his commandments, you are a true worshiper. So it's step by step. It's step, precept upon precept. How do you become? What role does obedience and surrendering play in true worshiping? The role they play is the role of love. Is the show that, yes, I truly love God. Because no matter what, whether it is you as a person presenting yourself as a living sacrifice to God, or you are worshiping him in a form of congregational worship, whether you are leading people into his presence in worship section, or you are being led by another person into his presence worshiping him, he says that you become true. Your worship becomes true to me. Your worship becomes acceptable to me when I look at you and see love for me in your heart. Not love for what I can give, not love for who I can be, but love for me. And before I can say that this is love for me, I have seen obedience. I have seen surrendering. I have seen not wanting your own way, not wanting your own will. I have seen not fighting to say, "Oh Lord, I know this is what you say, but can I go this route?" I have seen complete and total obedience. And until he sees that, until he sees surrendering, total obedience that comes from a place of love for him, genuine love for him, he has still not seen a true worshiper. So for me and you to be a true worshiper, we have to start from a place of true, genuine love. So the role of obedience, the role of surrendering in true worship to God is vital. As a matter of fact, it is the ultimate. Because once those two things are out or replaced, forget about truly worshiping God. If you were looking for where to start from, you have to start from the place of obedience. You have to start from the place of love. Even if you have to start from the place of, Lord, help me to love you. Because when I love you, I will keep your commandments. And I love you, I will surrender. And then I can sincerely become a presentable, a holy person to you that is now acceptable in your sight, that is now a living sacrifice to you. So that role is important, that role is vital, that role is non negotiable. It is either you love him and you are a living and a true sacrifice, or you don't love him at all. Because when you don't love him, you don't obey him. I don't have to listen to somebody I don't like. As a matter of fact, I won't listen to somebody I don't love. The fact that I'm listening to you and I'm doing what you tell me to do is because I love you. And that is how God receives love. He receives love by obedience. He receives love by, because when you surrender, you obey. There's no way you obey and not surrender. But you can surrender and not obey. So let us not go to that one today. You can obey. Well, if you obey, you will surrender. You can surrender without obedience. You can just surrender grudgingly. But when you obey God, it will be easy for you to surrender to God. So let us start from the place of obedience. And that is how we can become a true worshiper. Obedience in true worshiping is non negotiable. Thank you very much.
Obedience in true worshiping is non negotiable. When you obey, you will surrender, but you can surrender without obey because you can be forced to surrender. Wow, very powerful. Thank you so much for making it great for us today on this podcast side. I believe that everyone who this comes across will be blessed by it. And I'm sure that they will pass it on to somebody else as well, because some of the stuff you said here will have anyone who by any means stumble into this. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, sir.
All right, stay with me in the studio. Now we'll be right back. To everybody who have listened to us today, this is where we are calling in today. I want to hope that as you listen to these, you will take it and you will share it with somebody else. In doing so, you are sharing love as well. Remember that when you obey God, you will surrender to Him. Remember that you cannot afford to live a life that is not in obedience to God. So I hope that all things work together for good for you, even as you go about your days. Well, until next time, I remain yours, Solomon. Oluwabiye. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Bye for now.